a knuck around here somewhere. But you have to remember, if you're going to come with me, that knuckers are a type of dragon and they're extremely dangerous. So I want you to do exactly what I ask you to do and not stray off the path. The Dragon's Eye is about two Victorian children, Daniel and Beatrice Cook, whose parents are living in India, and they don't come back when they're expected to, so they have to go and stay with Dr. Ernest Drake, their parents' old tutor, and they gradually find out that Dr. Ernest Drake is a dragonologist, someone who studies dragons. He takes them down to St. Leonard's Forest, where they meet two dragons, and they begin to learn about them, but then things take a quite unexpected turn.
I peered ahead into the gloom and realized that there was something slithering gently ahead of me through the undergrowth. It was the knucker. As I edged forward, I trod on a stick which broke with a loud snap and caused Weasel to stop and raise her head. As she turned towards me, I could see that she had two bright, snake-like eyes, but her eyes didn't have the intelligence of Scorcher's eyes. I stayed as still as I could. The knucker, which must have been very used to Dr. Drake by now, glanced over at him and then ignored us. I studied her carefully. She was leathery brown and seemed to have skin rather than scales. I could see two little bunches near her front legs which must have been useless wings. Meanwhile, Weasel continued her rabbit hunt. She slithered into a thick patch of undergrowth, her attention fixed on a patch of grass. Several rabbits, which had been disturbed by the noises I had made, had returned to feed. Weasel's head quivered in anticipation as she watched one particularly fat-looking rabbit hop over to join two others on a patch of clover. Suddenly, she leapt forward. Her tail flicked around behind, and her snake-like body curled into three loops which she dropped neatly over the three rabbits' heads. Soon, they were dangling from the loops in Weasel's body like clothes bobbing on a washing line. Then, with three quick gulps, they were gone. The knucker stretched, gave a happy little shudder and a wiggle, and then slithered away. And with that, we returned through the forest and back to Castle Drake.
Now this is something quite unexpected, and I'm a bit worried because there's a footprint here, and this is not a knucker footprint. It's far too large. It has three toes like this, which is common to a knucker as well, but judging by its impression in the mud, I would say this is a young wyvern footprint, and so we may be in some considerable danger now. And I think that really we should get out of here as soon as we possibly can. Do I believe in dragons? Well, that's an interesting question, and I must say it's one that I'm quite often asked, especially by children. The way I like to think about dragons is, for years, people thought that there was no such creature as an okapi. They thought that a duck-billed platypus couldn't possibly exist, and yet these creatures did prove to exist. There are legends of dragon-like creatures all over the world, and without any evidence that they don't exist, I'd quite like to think that maybe they do.
By now I was even more anxious to see what might be in the room where the smoke had come from. So I turned toward the door again and put my eye to the keyhole. Everything seemed dark at first, but as my eyes adjusted, I was able to make out what lay beyond. The room, which was lit by two candles, was in a terrible state of disarray. Many of the books from the bookshelves had been knocked onto the floor. There were three desks piled high with bottles of liquids, oddly shaped specimen jars, and a multitude of other strange objects. Suddenly, I saw a smallish creature spring out from behind one of the desks and dash around the room, half leaping and half flying. Was it some kind of large bird after all? I decided to open the door just a little to see it more clearly. I was very, very careful indeed as I edged the door open little by little until... boom! Something smashed into the door with such force that it quite knocked me over backwards. Something that I still could hardly make out was flying around and around the room. I could see wings, scales, and a wisp of smoke rising from its nostrils. With wings outspread and claws at the ready, it fixed me with its beady eyes and began to fly straight at me until, bang! Somebody came up behind me and slammed the door shut. I looked up to see an old gentleman with a large moustache leaning over me in a very disapproving manner, holding the door shut with one hand and wagging his finger at me with the other. "Daniel Cook, I presume," he said.
Dr. Ernest Drake lives in London, and he also lives in St Leonard's Forest. He has a shop in London called Dr. Drake's Dragonalia, where you can buy things like flame-proof cloaks and whistles to attract dragons. And he has a small summer school that he runs down in St Leonard's Forest for a very select few who go on to become members of the Secret and Ancient Society of Dragonologists. He lived, well, we know that he was alive in 1896, according to Dragonology, which he supposedly wrote, and in which he gives his scientific explanation of dragons.
There's a wyvern just through that clump of trees, and this is absolutely amazing, but terrifying at the same time. And I mustn't speak too loudly in case it hears me, but I've never seen one up this close before. They usually live in Africa. I don't know what one is doing in this forest, but I'm absolutely terrified. But it's so exciting. It's just there. I almost feel as though I could reach out and touch it. I'm going to have to go and see if I can get a better look.
I think that children will find my new novel exciting rather than scary. There might be some very young children who end up hiding behind the sofa in a Doctor Who kind of style, but I don't think that it's going to scare the living daylights out of them. This novel's going to appeal to anyone who loves dragonology, but particularly children from 8 to 12 years old. And I really hope that they enjoy reading about Dr. Drake, Daniel Cook and Beatrice and their dragonological adventures.